Okay, let's get started. Hello.
Hey,
Welcome.
how are you?
Thank you so much for joining us during Johns Hopkins Alumni Weekend Goes Virtual for this crab cake demonstration with Chef John Shields. My name is Sydney Dawson, and I am an Assistant Director of Alumni Relations in the Reunion and Homecoming Office. We are very pleased to bring this session to you today. I not only have the pleasure of kicking things off, but I'll also facilitate the Q&A session after the demonstration. Please feel free to submit any questions you have for the chef using the Q&A button on your screen, and we will happily address them once the demonstration is complete. We also have an exciting surprise, which involves random prize winners for those who stick around with us until the end of the session. So please stay tuned for your chance to win. Now to introduce our chef. Chef John Shields is the co-owner and proprietor of Gertrude's restaurant at the Baltimore Museum of Art. Often called the culinary ambassador of the Chesapeake Bay, John has written multiple cookbooks on the cuisine of the Chesapeake region. John's newest book, The New Chesapeake Kitchen, was published by Johns Hopkins University Press and released in October 2018. Today, he will share and show the recipe for Gertie's crab cake from the 20th anniversary edition of Chesapeake Bay Cooking. Whether you are cooking along or just watching for fun, we really hope you enjoy. Here is Chef John Shields.
Thank you, Sydney. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this, having a full day of Crab Cakes 101. We also call it the care and handling of crab cakes. So it's a great honor to be here for Hopkins Alumni Week. And it's something I usually do every year because my restaurant Gertrude's sits right on the Homewood campus. And so it usually is a very, very festive weekend for us for Alumni Weekend. So we're just switching that around since there seems to be a pandemic going on. And so we'll welcome you to my own home kitchen. And generally, you know, I've been doing crab things, Chesapeake things for, oh my God, 30 some years. And whenever I go around the country and I talk about the Chesapeake, which I love so much, generally the first thing that comes up is crab cakes. Everybody wants to know about crab cakes. They've all heard about crab cakes. And, you know, it seems to be like this mysterious thing. Many people not even sure where the Chesapeake Bay is, but they do know about the crab cakes. So anyway, I thought that might be a fitting thing for us to do. We're just starting to get into the warm weather of the spring, and then summer's upon us. So it is crab season, which is a beautiful thing. So what I did, the recipe that we're going to do today is from Chesapeake Bay Cooking. It was the original book that I did, oh my God, it's almost 25 years ago now, that turned into a PBS series. And so I'm taking the recipe from there. It was my grandmother's recipe. And we're gonna futz a little bit with it. And hopefully Grandma, wherever she is, she won't get mad with me, because when I do recipes, I love doing a little futzing. So let's talk about this. I like to use Maryland crab meat whenever possible. So we were able to get crab meat from Cambridge, Maryland at J.M. Clayton's, which is the oldest seafood processing plant on the Chesapeake Bay, which is pretty cool. And so different recipes will call for different types of crab meat. I guess you can see this here. This is the jumbo lump. It's the creme de la creme of the crab. And it costs a lot of money. So some recipes will call for all jumbo lump. Some will call for lump. Some will call for claw meat and a combination. So I thought I'm going to double the recipe and I'm going to add some claw meat. Claw meat is often maligned. They say, I don't want any claw meat. Claw meat is awesome. It's sweet, it's delicious, And I like to add something like that to the jumbo lump because by themselves, they don't hold together all that well. So I do like to blend the meat. Okay, let's get started. So
Hey, John.
Yes.
Before we get started, we have a question about using imitation crab meat. So if you use imitation crab meat, do you need to adjust anything else in the recipe?
Well, that's a good question. You can get imitation crab meat is actually, it could be cod, pollock. It's a number of different whitefish, and they're kind of up, and it's pressed all together to make it look like a crab, like Alaskan crab meat or something like that. And it's taste. I mean, it has a fine flavor. Maybe not exactly like crab, but it'll be a really good fish cake, essentially. So what you need, the only thing you need to think about that, and I'll show you when we get to that, is how much binding you're going to put in. Binding means breadcrumbs or cracker crumbs or flour, however you're going to bind your crab cakes, because moisture content is the most important thing. So if something's drier, you want to put in a little less breading. If it's wetter, you need to put a little bit more in. So we'll go.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy, for that question.
No worries. All right. So we have our two different kinds of crab meats here. And what I'm going to do is we're going to put them both together. So that was the claw meat. And here is that beautiful jumbo lump. It is just a gorgeous thing. Excuse me. You know, crab these days has been a little bit scarce. We've had all kinds of different issues. There were weather issues a couple of years ago. There were immigration. We have politics, a lot of food politics issues around getting local crab meat. So it is an issue. And then, you know, since if there's less of it, that price goes right up. So that's why it's a good idea to maybe blend this with some claw meat, which is lower. That way you don't have to take a second mortgage on the house when you want to have a bunch of people over. So these are, you know, there's economics involved in this as well. All right, so let me just get a glove here because it's a little easier to do this. A lot of the stuff that you do with crab cakes, and when you're making crab cakes, you're doing with your hands, and you're getting the feel of how much moisture is in there, how many more breadcrumbs you might need in there. This crab meat, especially the crab meat we get from J.M. Clayton, is very, very good. And generally, there's very rarely a shell in there. But I'm trying to just look pristine today, so that's why I have the gloves on. Normally, I had to just go through it, and I just check to see if there's a little bit of shell in the crab meat when I'm doing that. Because in my family, in the earlier days, they didn't pick so good. So there was a lot of shell in there, and you could get in trouble. So if you went to Aunt Tracy Litzis's for a First Communion dinner, and there was a lot of shell in it, they would talk about her for 2-3 years. So you wanted to be very careful about your shell content. All right, so we have that kind of mixed together. Now, if you see, I'm not stirring this. Keep this one thing in mind. Do not have a spoon around you when you're making crab cakes, because there will be no stirring of any part with the crab. We have to treat it gently. All right, here we go. Now, let me get rid of this little glove. Okay, so the next thing that we have to consider is the batter. Crab cake batter is what it's all about. There's all kinds of different philosophies, theories, recipes. Now, we do at the restaurant Gertrude's, I always do 2 crab cakes. So there's always the Gerties, which we're going to have now, and I do a rotating crab cake, a du jour crab cake that comes from all around the Chesapeake, so you can kind of taste the differences in flavors and different techniques. But this style, the Gertie style, is something that's more attuned to kind of the Baltimore or the Western Shore. It has a little bit more flavoring in it than Eastern Shore. Eastern Shore guys, all they want is crab. It's like, we don't need to mess it up with anything. So they'll often take a little bit of melted butter, little freshly grated horseradish, some lemon juice, and they pour it all over the crab meat. So it's really lemon butter and little breadcrumbs, and then they fry them up. So that's that. But of course, on the Western Shore, we had to get, you know, a little fancy and creative. So we've done something that has a little bit more spice to it, let us say. All right, so I just got myself a couple of eggs at the farmer's market today. I go to the Waverly 32nd Street Market. So any of you that actually went to the Homewood campus, you might remember that farmer's market. It's been there for, I think, 40 years now. And it's one of the best farmers markets in the whole city. So I'm a big supporter of that. So anyway, you got that. So that's the first part of it. Now you want to start putting in your spices and everything. Now you're going to have mayonnaise. Generally, there is mayonnaise in most crab cake recipes, except some of the ones on the Eastern Shore. So it says to put in 2 heaping tablespoons, but obviously, since we're doubling that recipe, I'm putting 4 heaping tablespoons in. Got that there. And we'll just whisk that up. Now, I don't know how many of you have done a lot of steamed crabs or picking the crabs. It takes a long time. You know, it takes a long time to pick. And people will often say, why do you guys down there do that? Why do you got the little crabs, you pick them, and what can you get out of that? Well, we get a good time out of it. We sit there, we pick crabs, we talk, we tell stories, we drink beer. It's a good thing to do. But I guess if you would be, let's say we would be an 8th day Adventist, we could take it this way. On the 8th day, God created the crab cake for those too lazy to pick. So that's how this all started. And all right, so here, let me get back to business here. Okay, I'm going to use some dry mustard. You'll find in most of the early Chesapeake recipes, there's always dry mustard in it. It traveled well, it could store well, so you didn't find a lot of prepared mustard. Now, Gertie might get herself upset, but I sometimes do like to put a little Dijon in with it as well, but that's up to you. You get a basic recipe and you can play with it any way you like, and then it's your signature recipe. Okay, so there. So you have a nice smooth batter and you want it to be smooth. Now another ingredient that you'll find in all the old Chesapeake recipes is Worcestershire sauce. They put that in everything. It's kind of amazing. I would find it, you know, it's an English condiment, and it's a flavoring they put in tons of recipes. I always also found in most of the seafood recipes, it would call for a blade of mace. Now, I don't know if you know what mace is exactly, but that'll be a question at the end. If anybody can answer what is mace. But you would find it in all kind of recipes for seafood. Okay, now we have that. Now, all right, here you go. You've all heard of this, Old Bay. Okay, we could do a whole show talking about Old Bay and the wonders of Old Bay and why people here like Old Bay or why they don't like Old Bay. But the general consensus is they like it, and it's a huge collection of spices in here that originally came from the bottom of the barrels of the spice merchants. And this is the story. These the tavern owners down along the Patapsco River, there were factories and canneries all up and down there. Well, they needed something to get people to drink more beer. So they asked the spice people to throw everything together and put a lot of salt in it and some heat. They would steam crabs, put them on the bar for free, like peanuts, and it would get people to drink more beer. So that's where this whole kind of thing came from. So it calls for about a teaspoon of the Old Bay. And Old Bay also can be used to steam crabs. And anybody who grew up around here will have those memories of the outdoor crab feast and the humid air, and you would just smell that kind of Old Bay wafting through the evening air. It was just, I have a lot of good childhood memories around that. Okay, next up, a little bit of Tabasco sauce. Just want to get a spice, so just a couple per batch. So I'm doing it ×2, so I put a little bit more in, and you have to know your guests. Some of them will like spice, some won't like spice, so adjust it whichever way you like. Now, it was said that the first crab cakes, actually, in Captain John Smith's diaries, he wrote about these crab things that were being made by the Native Americans, and they would take the crabs and they would put them in pits with hot coals or embers, steam the crabs, take all the meat out, and then they would put it with, it was a root vegetable, a tuber, kind of like a sweet potato, and they would mix it all up, and then they would fry it in bear fat. Now that must have had some flavor to it. I can only imagine, but that's how far back it goes about, you know, the Chesapeake and crab cakes. All right, now I think we have everything here for our batter, as you can see. So what I'm going to do next is just pour the batter all over the crab meat. So let me get that here. There we go. Lovely. Get that out of here. Okay, I'll bring this over here so everybody can see what's going on. Let me turn up my heat here. Okay, so you see we have the batter in here. Now, this is another great area of contention and debate. What do you bind the crab cakes with? Binding means getting them to hold together. That's the general idea. Now, what's different about a Chesapeake crab cake than almost any other crab cake is that we try to put the least amount of binding into the crab cake as possible, because really what you're getting here is almost all crab. You know, us Marylanders or Chesapeake people will be driving. Let's say we're driving and we're going through Boise, Idaho, and we stop at the diner and it says Chesapeake style crab cake. You've all done it, you've seen it. And we say, oh my God, that could be not good at all. But we all order it. And then we're disappointed, and then we say, I knew it. But what happens generally in these other crab cakes, they'll put almost the same ratio of binding, whether breadcrumbs or whatever, as crab meat. So it's half and half. We do not like that here. We want all crab. Okay, so again, there's a number of different things that you can put in to bind it. Regular toasted breadcrumbs are lovely. The panko breadcrumbs, the Asian style breadcrumbs, are really nice too. But my grandmother Gertie, she loved her saltines, and I could live on saltines myself. So some recipes say, well, lay out your saltines and get a rolling pin and just roll them the salt. Now, I'm going to tell, after almost 50 years of cooking, let me show you how you do it. You just take your bag of salt, of your saltines, and you just go like this. Like it, you can roll it if you want, roll them around a little bit like this. They don't have to be really fine, because basically all they're doing is sucking up the moisture that's in there. So what I'm going to do is put my little saltines here into my cup. So it could, according to our ratio, take almost a quarter of a cup to a third of a cup per pound of crab meat. That's the general ratio, which you won't know until you really get your hands in it to see, does it have too much moisture? Does it not have enough? So what I generally do is I don't put it all in. I'll just put yay much in, and then we will toss it together and see what we have. Let me get my handy dandy glove here that I have on backwards. There we go. And let me just turn this up a little bit. Once we get our crab cakes put together, then we have to decide how we're going to cook them. Are we going to deep fry them? Or are we going to saute them? Are we going to broil them? Again, this is a whole nother area of debate. Some people, will swear, don't you ever fry a crab cake. It has to be broiled because then you can't taste the flavor of the crab if you don't do that. That's an area of debate. Some people really love a fried crab cake. And most people, when I give them a fried crab cake, they always really like it the best. But they want to appear to be healthier, so that's why they say broil. But that's okay. So try it any way that you like. We're going to do one that's more like a saute. I don't like to really deep fry it, but I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so now I'm mixing all my nice little, all right, pay attention here. If you're seeing what I'm doing, remember I said no spoons in here. We are just gently tossing this together, because if you took out the second mortgage to get the jumbo lump crab meat, you do not want to break up the lumps. That's what we paid for. So you want to be really, really, really gentle with this. All right, how's that looking? Looking good? It's a little tiny bit wet right now for me, so I'm just going to take a little bit more of the saltine crumbs here and put those together. Now, I'll give you a tip that we're not going to do right now, just because I don't think you have enough time, is I generally, at this point, would either put the whole mixture in the refrigerator for about an hour, or I'll get the thing, we can make the crab cakes. You could put them in the refrigerator for, an hour, half an hour. It gives the crab a little bit of time to absorb the liquid. They hold together a little bit better. But we're going to do this the dangerous way. And if you were in a hurry, we're going to put a little bit of parsley in this too. And I usually use Italian parsley, or it's also known as flat leaf parsley. It actually, it makes them look pretty, but it has some flavor too. It is an herb. All righty. Okay, so let me grab myself a little plate here, and we can make us some crab cakes. So generally, with a pound of crab meat, you can probably get about 6 crab cakes out of it, smaller crab cakes. I usually get, for the restaurant, 4 or 5 out of it. And if you make them too small, again, then that becomes an appetizer, or people will talk about you and say you're cheap. So are you seeing, this is kind of the size of a regular crab cake. That would be about 4, 5, 6 ounces, somewhere in that vicinity. Okay. If you notice, I did not push. I did not squeeze. I did not put pressure, because remember what we talked about? We talked about our lumps, right? So I'm just making them just like that. Just getting about the right amount. It kind of fits right nice right in the palm of your hand. That kind of gives you an indication of, so see, just like that. It's a beautiful, beautiful crab cake. And so I'm heating up a little bit of vegetable oil right now. I generally use a canola oil, and the reason for that is it doesn't have a lot of flavor in it, and it has a higher temperature that you can cook without the oil burning. So let's just let's put a little bit of this in here. All right, now we're cooking. Now I don't even have a half an inch of oil in there. That's maybe about a quarter of an inch of oil in there. And so really what I'm doing at this point is just browning them, starting on each side. It takes about probably 5 to 7 minutes, really, if you were gonna do this in a saute, and maybe 3 minutes on one side, 3 minutes on the other side. Another thing that you could do, put a little less oil in it, have your oven preheated to like about 400, and just brown them on both sides, stick them in the oven for like 10, 15 minutes, and you're done. It's a great way to do it, and then they all come out kind of at the same time. Again, if you're having a bunch of people over, it's a great way to do that. All right. Ooh, now that's looking good. That is a pretty crab cake. So I also did two pounds of crab meat because, you know, we're kind of sequestered here at the apartment, and I have a lot of neighbors who are actually going to be, this aroma of crab cakes is going to be going out into the hallway. So I figure I'll just make more now. I'll go around and hand them out to everybody today. I think it'll make them quite happy. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to move this out of the way here real quick, like, so we can see more of a finished product. Let's see. All right, one of the things that I generally do, and it's a good idea to do whenever you're frying or sauteing anything, I keep a plate with some paper towels on top of it just to absorb the grease there at the end. All right, let's get in here. Come here, crab cake. All right, there you go. Now, as you can see, this is not difficult to do. I mean, and I know that there is this mystique around it, and I understand that. But I think the things to keep in mind are keep it simple. You know, really keep it simple. That's kind of the philosophy of Chesapeake cooking and of crab cakes. Again, if we go back to Captain John Smith, he wrote in his diaries when he first sailed into the Chesapeake, he said, when we first sailed into the Chesapeake, the fish were so thick, we attempted to catch them with frying pans. And that, I think, really summed up the whole concept of Chesapeake cooking. To take the best that we have from the Bay, don't try to spoof it up too much, just let the flavors kind of come on through. And so that's what's so nice about a crab cake. Now here, let me get another little thing here we can do. So some of the things, if we were going to finish up a crab cake platter, I like to do French fries or roasted potatoes. These are roasted garlic potatoes. And when I was down at the farmer's market this morning, the line for the asparagus was out of this world. But I stood in it and I waited because this is some of the first asparagus of the season that came in, and it's looking beautiful. Let me grab one other thing here for you. Another kind of thing that you would serve with the crab cakes, coleslaw. We just love coleslaw with crab cakes or with fried oysters or anything like that. It's usually really refreshing. And you could even put out a platter of sliced summer tomatoes with a little bit of salt over top of it. If it's corn on the cob time, put a platter of that out. And this is some of the best that the Chesapeake actually has to offer. So anyway, this is Gertie's version of a crab cake. And as I said, there's so many other ways that you can go. In both of my books, the Chesapeake Bay Cooking, we have recipes from all over. And then in the new one, we even have one that's called, I Can't Believe It's Not Crab Cakes. And we take zucchini and grate it on the coarse part of the grater, squeeze out the water, and then essentially you're making a crab cake batter, mixing it all together and frying it, broiling it. And we serve it at the restaurant. People go crazy for it. So even if you're not a seafood eater, but you want that crab cake experience, it can be done. And that recipe is in the new Chesapeake Kitchen. So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking with you more about this and talking about questions, not only about how you make crab cakes, but I'd love to hear any questions that you have about crab, about the Chesapeake in general, the conditions, how is the seafood doing? How's the crab population? How's the other seafood doing? Then we have the whole issue of who's picking the crab. Are we getting enough people in to our region to pick crab? And if we don't, what happens then? So, this is some of the food politics that goes on around crab. You would never think that there would be so much talk and issues that go on around crab, but they do. So I've been doing this for a good bit of time, and so I would be delighted to talk to you about anything you'd like to talk to about this, or anything else you want to talk about. So Sydney.
Chef John Shields, thank you so much. That looks so delicious. I've never craved a crab cake more. So, wow, thank you so much.
I wish we had odorama, but it's really good.
Wouldn't that be nice? So we actually have several questions here. So let's see if we can get to them all.
Okay.
Oh, first up, Anne asks, can you use bread and or crackers as a binder?
Bread and or, you mean mixing both, do you think? Do you think that'd be the question?
I think possibly, maybe either or as well. What do you recommend?
Okay, yeah. So anyway, here, let me grab something. I'll show it to you. I'm sorry. When I was talking about other breadcrumbs, these are the panko breadcrumbs. They're the Japanese style. They're kind of like almost, they have a texture almost of a cracker, but they're bread. So they're coarse. They're very, very nice. And we use these often at the restaurant. Obviously, you saw that I used these saltines and turned that into cracker meal. Or you can get just traditional breadcrumbs that you get at the store. Now, I did, also in this book, Chesapeake Bay Cooking, there's one, it's called Senator Barb's Crab Cakes. Senator Barbara Mikulski was on my first television series, and so she did a whole thing that's legendary now, her crab cakes. And her family had a bakery in East Baltimore. So the way they did it is they took the stale bread, sliced bread, took off the crust, then cut them into little cubes, let them dry out, and then they would put them in, do the same thing we just did, and that would suck up the liquid, and it made a beautiful crab cake as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different variations and ways that you can do that binding.
Wonderful. And so we also had two other questions about the binding and the secret to keeping them together. Susan mentioned hers broke apart, so she's asking for the secret. And Marty said he tried this recipe with canned crab cake, purchased frozen, and there was too much moisture. So should canned crab cake be dried to reduce the moisture, or just add more binder in that case?
Okay, well, there's two questions there. Let's talk about the frozen. Was it canned crab? What did you say? Was it frozen?
Yes, canned, and then he purchased it frozen.
Okay, so what I suggest to do with that, and I learned this from some of the ladies on the Eastern Shore that picked crab, because what they would do, they would pick the crab and they would put it in like a Pyrex dish, and they'd sprinkle milk over it, and then they put it in sealed bags, and they would freeze it. That would be for the winter. And so let's make believe like we have that frozen crab meat. What they suggested that you do, get a bowl, but then get a colander. Put the colander in the bowl, put your frozen crab meat in there, put it in the refrigerator and let it defrost overnight. So the extra moisture drips out as it's defrosting, and then it's absolutely lovely. Now, let's say that you don't do that, or you don't feel like doing that, and it's too much trouble to do that. Then you're gonna have more moisture in your crab meat. So you are gonna have to increase the binding. So where I said before, 1/4 to 1/3 of cup per pound, you're gonna have to start at 1/3 and maybe go up to 2/3 if it's really wet. So yeah, so that's it. And what was the question before that? You said there were
It was
two.
about the secret to keeping it together, making sure.
Okay, so really what I had said before, because a lot of people have talked to me about that, and that usually happens when you're using just jumbo lump or maybe jumbo lump and lump, because there's so much air and space in between it. If you just make it, it'll fall apart. That's one of the nice things about that I use the claw. It helps to solidify it. But let's say you made it with jumbo lump and lump, or just jumbo lump. Do just like I showed you. Form them very gently, like I said. Cover it with some saran wrap, put it in the refrigerator, and let it sit for at least 1 hour before you make it. You could do them earlier in the day. You could do it the night before, but let them sit, and I promise you, they'll hold together.
There you go. Good tips. Okay, we've got a question about the temperature when you're cooking crab cakes. So Beth asks, especially if it's a bit thick, is there an internal temperature to check?
Well, I think an internal temperature check would be about 145 would be fine. One of the things to realize and to remember, whenever you're cooking crab cakes or anything made with crab, it's already cooked. You could open it and just eat the whole pound. You are not cooking this. We're not really cooking it. We're just heating it through. So it's not so much a issue of safety. It's more of an issue, I want my crab cake to be hot in the middle. So that's more what it is. It's not like cooking a piece of raw fish or a steak where you have to worry about what that internal temperature is. Just as long as it's warm enough for you to eat and you're happy with that, you're all good.
There you go. Okay. And we have a few questions about crab meat brands that you recommend. So Denisha asks, are there any other recommendation for crab meat brands or sources? She lives in Texas, which is far from Maryland.
Yeah.
That's one question. And then Jill also asks, can you share a few more of your favorite crab meat brands that you use?
Well, okay. So in Texas, obviously they have the Gulf Coast. And so a lot of the crab meat, even that we get here, comes from Texas, from the Gulf Coast. So generally people in Texas can go to their fishmonger or to a grocery store that deals in that. Costco actually has a very good pasteurized crab meat. It probably, I don't think it's from, I don't think it's US crab meat. One of the things you don't want to get, so you're walking down the aisle in the grocery store and there's a tuna fish up there, you got some sardines up there, and then it says canned crab meat right there. Don't get it. Don't get it. It's cat food. And I love cats. So if you want to get some for your cat, it's a beautiful thing. But please don't get it to make crab cakes. Brands. Well, there's not that many actual brands that you can get. There's this J.M. Clayton's that we have around, and I think that you can get this scent. It's called the Smith Island Crab Co-op. It's a bunch of women that live on Smith Island, and it's a really good crab meat because they don't separate it into grades. They put it all together like a crab. So you have jumbo lump, you have back fin, and you have claw meat, the same ratio that's in a crab, and they put it all together. And it's so flavorful. It's really wonderful. And I think that if you go on the World Wide Web and go to the Smith Island Crab Co-op, that can be shipped to you. Some other things, you usually have to go to big box places, or if you do have a fishmonger, they generally will bring in all kinds of crab from the Carolinas, Florida. So I try to first go with the USA crab. So obviously we start to try to see if we can source in the Chesapeake, then go to the Carolinas. That's the best way to go. The next one is Venezuelan crab meat, which they ship in every day. So if you have a good fish monger, again, they usually will get that every day. It's fresh, it's just picked, and it's a lovely alternative to that. A lot of the pasteurized that you get is coming from Southeast Asia, which is not a bad thing in itself. The only thing is when they process it there, so that it will store for a long time, they use a process, it's almost like bleaching it, because what they want to do is get rid of the fat, because fat goes rancid. So they're trying to get rid of the fat in the crab meat. But as anyone from Maryland knows, the fat's what gives it the flavor. So it'll give you a good consistency of crab cake. And if you're making a spicy one, like us, if we put some more mustard in it or some more hot sauce, if all you can get is the Southeast Asian, it's fine, and it'll make a very nice crab cake. So you have to decide which level you want to go and what's available where you are.
Sorry, muted there for a second. Thank you. So we got a few questions about changing the recipe a bit based on allergies or dietary restrictions.
Sure.
Jeff says, my daughter has asked me to make crab cakes gluten-free. Is there a way to do that? And then we have two other comments about being allergic to eggs. So is there any substitute for that?
All right, we got a ways to go with that, yes. Just about everywhere I go now, and I get big containers of it, and I've tried a number of different brands of the gluten-free breadcrumbs, and they're fine. We get requests for this at the restaurant all the time. There'll be wedding parties that are coming, and they ask us to use that, and it works fine. One of the things that I would suggest when using the gluten-free, it's not quite as absorbent. So it does really need to sit in that refrigerator for a couple of hours first, and then it'll hold together and it'll be fine. I mean, no one would know the difference, I promise. And as far as eggs, there's a couple of different thought processes on that. What I generally do if someone has an allergy with that, there's these box things that you can get at most, like Whole Foods or whatever. It's called Energy Egg Replacer. It's a powder, and you put a couple of tablespoons of warm water, whisk it up, it foams up real nice, and it works just like an egg would do that. And then there's also another product that we use a lot at the restaurant, again, specifically for this. It's called Vegan Eggs, which is a vegan mayonnaise, so there's no egg in it at all. And there's a number of brands of that, but that's the one that I use. So you get a gluten-free breadcrumb, use the vegan A's, and you should be fine. We also use both of those ingredients when we make our I can't believe it's not crab cake, because then it becomes gluten-free and vegan. So, and it's still delicious. It's, you know, absolutely delicious. So yeah, so there are ways to do that now.
Thank goodness. Yeah, substitutes are much more easily found these days. So,
which is great.
Yes, very great. Okay, a few more questions to get to here. Susan asks, the recipe that we gave called for fresh ground pepper. Does this go into the batter?
Yes, I had already put a little bit in. I ground it with a grind, you know, with the pepper grinder. And be careful with that too. I use the pepper grinder to make mine, because sometimes when you get stuff in the grocery store, it's very finely ground. And I think that, you know, it calls for like a half a teaspoon of it. And when it's really finely ground, I find it too peppery. So I like to either grind it myself, but a medium grind is best. They also make, it's called coarse ground black pepper. Don't do that, because you'll get that, all of a sudden you get a big piece of it, you bite into it, it's like, whoa, wake up.
Thank you, good advice.
And also in the recipe, because they saw that the black pepper is in there, but also what wasn't in there in the recipe was the parsley. But I just put a couple tablespoons of fresh chopped parsley in it, just because I like the way that it looks. And also I think it gives it a little bit of nice flavor as well. It's like kind of fresh flavor.
That's the chef's touch, I'd call it.
Yes.
Okay, Susan asks, how long can cooked crab cakes be in the fridge, and can they be frozen?
How long do I cook them? I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
How long can cooked crab cakes, once you've already cooked them, be in the fridge, or can you freeze them?
Okay, both good questions. Generally, if I make crab cakes and I want to have them left, and I have a bunch left over, which isn't usual, but if I do, I would not keep it for more than 2 days in the refrigerator. It would be safe for about 2 days. One of the things that you can do, if you're not sure, one of the things to do, take a little piece of the crab cake and cook it up or fry it or something like that. Pick it up and smell it. If it just smells like crab, you're good to go. If you're smelling ammonia, it went off. But usually 2 days is fine. And I mean, I know other people who got real fresh crab meat and they're able to keep it for 3 days. But since we're here in the public, I don't want to go for anything more than 2 days. And freezing, okay. There's a number of different ways you can do that. You could cook them, or you could cook them partially and then wrap them individually and then freeze them. And then generally, if I let them defrost in the refrigerator, you know, I take them out either early in the morning or the night before, I let it defrost there. And I might reheat a little bit in the pan, but I usually will finish it in the oven. That seems to be the best way to do that. You can make this mixture like we just made, form them, wrap them, and freeze them before they're cooked as well. What I do find with that is that they're often wetter. They just get wet and it kind of oozes a little bit while you're cooking it. So a way around that is you could have some more like these panko breadcrumbs. And when you're ready to fry them or cook them, just lightly coat them on the outside with them and do it if you have put them in uncooked and frozen first. It's just a trick that I learned and it seems to work. So I don't know if it's scientific, but it works.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary asks, what about pasteurized versus unpasteurized crab meat?
Okay, so what I actually use today is pasteurized from J.M. Clayton down in Cambridge, Maryland. And in the olden days, originally when you would get a pasteurized product, I wasn't as crazy about it. You know, like 25 years ago, it would almost have a little tinny taste to it, but they have a completely new process that they do pasteurized crab meat now, and it's very nice. And usually that's the crab meat, except right in the summer, that is the most readily available. In the summer, if you can get, and we usually do at the restaurant, we get it brought in every day and it's fresh picked. That's optimal. Yes, that's the best that you can get. But that's sometimes difficult for people to do. So again, fresh, best way to go. A good pasteurized crab meat, very nice. Do not buy the tinned crab meat next to the tuna fish. So that's my advice on that.
Perfect, thank you. Let's see. So Alice mentioned your question before about if anyone knew what mace was. And so she answered and she said mace is the lacy covering of nutmeg fruit. Did she get it right?
She got it right. Here's a crab cake. Okay, you won. No, that's what it is. It's this fibrous outside coating of the nutmeg. And they, in early American cooking, you would find it called for in most seafood recipes and most meat recipes. Now, the sad part of that story is that they would put a lot of spices, especially warm spices, in, because often they didn't have refrigeration. So meat would go off, fish would be a little on the edge, and so that kind of would mask some of the problematics that could go along with that. I don't know what it did intestinally for you, but
Oh boy. Okay, I think we have time for just one last question here, and then we can move into the surprise that I mentioned earlier. I want to make sure that we save time for that. So for the last question, Curtis asks, how has your restaurant, Gertrude's, adapted to staying in business? And he's asking if you're currently closed, do you have plans for reopening?
Okay, yeah, Gertrude's, we closed in mid-March. As some of you might know, we're inside the Baltimore Museum of Art, right on the edge of that. And so the museum closed down and asked that we close down as well, so they didn't have to staff guards and everything on our side of the building. So we haven't been able to do any kind of curbside or carry out. So we've been totally closed down. We're working on menus. We're working on a simplified menu for when we get the A-OK to reopen. And obviously it'll be, Gertrude's light, and we'll maybe only be able to seat 25 to 50% of the regulars. But we have a gorgeous outdoor patio that sits on the Würzburger Sculpture Garden, as most of our Hopkins grads know. And so God willing, we'll be back out there in the next month or so. And I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yes, I know many local people, I'm sure, cannot wait either. So looking forward to that, and hoping everyone in the meantime is definitely staying safe and healthy. So, okay, before we wrap up, I mentioned the surprise earlier. Our office has actually partnered with 2 local restaurants, Jimmy's Seafood and Papa's Restaurant. So you may have seen on our website that Jimmy's is offering free shipping for their crab cakes. So if you go to jimmysfamousseafood.com and use the code Hopkins Reunion, that's one word, you can get free shipping. And then Papa's Restaurant has actually given us 4 $50 gift cards to raffle off right now.
Wow.
So very exciting. So I've randomly selected 4 of our participants here. And if I call your name, you should see a raise hand button on your screen. So I just want to make sure the people who are selected did stay with us through the session. So just raise your hand if I call your name. And then our office will reach out to you to confirm the address to send the gift cards. And these can be used for either carry out if you're local, or you can order a variety of menu items to ship to your house if you're not local. So either way, you can enjoy this. Okay, so drum roll. For our winners, again, you should see a raise hand button on your screen. So please raise your hand if I call your name. Marcy is the first winner. So let's see if Marcy is still here. Let's see. Marcy, okay, beautiful. I will reach out to you afterwards. Congratulations to our first winner. Second winner, Valerie Mazza. Valerie Mazza, are you here? Awesome, Valerie's here too. Congrats, Valerie. Okay, 2 more winners. Our next winner is Ken, and I'm so sorry if I don't get your last name pronounced correctly. Nia Jadlik. Ken, he already raised his hand before I even mentioned the last name, you know. Thank you, Ken, congratulations. And then our last winner is Chris Butterwick. Chris, are you here? Amazing, they were all here. Perfect. I had chosen backups just in case we lost anyone along the way, but everyone has stuck around, and it's because this has been such a wonderful session. Thanks to you, Chef John Shields. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. I've enjoyed it. I really hope everyone who has joined the call has enjoyed it. I think based on the chats that I've read throughout the session, I think everyone really did enjoy. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Sydney. It was a pleasure. I had the best time.
Wonderful. And I would like to remind everyone too that John's cookbooks are available on the JHU Press website. I've posted the links in the chat feature, so you should all have access to those. And you can actually use the code HJ, that's HJAY, for 25% off of those books. So that's a deal, and I think it's one to take advantage of. So again, both books can be purchased at the JHU Press website using code HJ, that's HJAY, for 25% off at checkout. So with that, just on behalf of the Johns Hopkins Alumni Weekend office, we really hope that everyone that joined us enjoyed the session. Thank you again, Chef John Shields. This has been such a pleasure. And we are wishing everyone safety and health. Please stay well, and I hope that you enjoy whatever you join us for the rest of the weekend. Thank you so much.